remember this someday, and I think he has. It was a life-changing
Governor Inslee. Your answer, after you kind of
by this incredible man.
Mother-in-law issue with whether or not you drank beer. But anyway, you got to it. You said, I will be a proud participant in the continued payment of investment in our schools through this beautiful amber nectar of the gods. So after some opening comments, we hope to have a few more chances to ask you some great questions like that. Thank you for your time, and thanks for coming here today. Oh, well, thank you, sir.
Really appreciate it. Well, good morning. It is a good morning. I'm so excited to join you here with another step forward with another great legislator and great governor and great attorney general. And I'm very excited to join you this morning. I've loved working with you. I want to bless your continued efforts. I want your tribe to increase. The longer I'm in this business, the more I understand the importance, the criticality of a professional journalism community, and I hope you will increase and remain vocal in your efforts. The truth is constantly being assailed by algorithms at this moment, and the best antidote for that is a good reporter. So I want to thank you for your tremendous efforts. I think it's probably fair or maybe expected for a moment to reflect of where we are after the last 12 years. And I just want to tell you, fundamentally, I am extremely proud of our state, and I am extremely confident of the course of our state and the continuing effort to bend the arc of the moral universe forward. And the reason I believe that is that during the last 12 years, I've looked at my principal role as to basically call the more ambitious part of Washington's nature, the more innovative part, the more creative part forward to really move forward. And I've done that, and I've asked Washington to really reach farther than they might have normally thought. And almost every single time, Washington has responded to that call with ambition and with a progressive energy and a creative spirit and a willingness to be undaunted to try new things. For the last 12 years, that's what Washington State has done. And so I leave the stage so much more confident than I came forward, having seen this incredible state time after time lead the nation and the world to a more just and prosperous future. And we have done this in so many occasions in the last 12 years. First state with a long-term care plan, one of the more successful ways to deal with COVID. Best clean energy policies in the United States, if not the world. A tremendous paid family leave program, highest minimum wage, single best financial aid package for our young people to go to college in the United States. 2 huge transportation packages that are really forward thinking. This has been a roll call of success by this state that I think you can say is maybe somewhat unparalleled. And so that's why I'm very confident in the state's ability to continue this upward climb. And we have to do that because we know, as any job, the job's never done. We've got more to do. But I am so enamored with the power and the compassion of the people of the state of Washington. It's blown me away what people are capable of doing if you ask them to raise their sights. Washingtonians will raise their sights and they will continue the climb. And they've done that time after time over the last 12 years. And if I may, I want to say in a democracy, your vision statements are tested. They're tested every couple of years or every 4 years. And that vision statement of ambition and commitment to our community and commitment to our future economically and environmentally was tested in the last election cycle, tested maybe never before. This never happened before of this dimension. And the reason it was tested is we had 3 initiatives on the ballot where the 3 most fundamental pillars of this chair of progress were tested at the ballot box. You could not have had a more clear referendum on the direction of the state of Washington than we had last November. And what did Washingtonians decide? They decided that, in fact, they didn't want to put taxes on working people. They thought it was fair that folks of wealth contribute a bit more to the progress of the state of Washington. They decided to not reduce our social safety net, not reduce mental health care or housing or assistance to people who are enjoying the twilight of their years, and decided to increase it and to retain it with the nation's first long-term care program. And they decided not to go backwards in the fight against climate change, but to continue this job creation effort that is now being so successful in the state of Washington. And they did this by overwhelming majorities. Every one of these was by over 60%. That means 50% more people voted for this vision than against it. So, and on the ballot box, obviously, they've elected some individuals that share my view about this vision statement. So I just am leaving you with such a high level of confidence of our future, both because of the personnel that are making these decisions and because of the innate genius and character of the people of the state of Washington. And I'm pleased to continue that effort as of today. In my little speech I gave last time, I said, we're going to run through the tape. Well, we're still running. This morning I just signed a permit for the Washington State's largest solar farm. It's called the Watoma Project. It's over in Benton County. It's over 450 megawatts, enough to power 300,000 homes. And it was my pleasure as one of my final acts to sign the permit so we can move forward with this solar project. And it was just kind of an indicia of, as I leave with the vision continuing to grow. As when I came in, I said we'd pass transportation budget. I said we would solve McCleary. I said we would continue to grow the clean energy future of the state of Washington. And I said we would always be driven by decisions based on science and compassion for our community. And I think we've done that in the last 12 years because of the character of people in the state of Washington. That has been the secret for success. And the fact that we continue to believe in democracy in our state that some folks have challenged, which I particularly appreciate. So with those comments, I'm happy to stand for your easy questions, which I expect because it is your last shot. So you might, take it easy a little bit on their departing governor, but I look forward to that. Roland, do you want to decide who's speaking, or do you want me to? Where's Roland? Do you want to decide who's speaking, or I got a lot of friends out here.
3 days, I don't care.
We'll just go around. First hand, yeah.
Two-part question. Wait for the mic, please. The mic. Actually, I do kind of care.
Right. Glad to see you, Governor. Two-part question. First, do you regret saying it's just going to cost pennies a gallon? And second, would you accept any changes to the appropriations, the guardrails on the CCA, and use some of that money to cover the budget deficit?
I always think the most important thing to do is listen to the citizens of the state of Washington. And they do not have regrets about this plan that we've adopted to move clean energy forward. By 62 to 38, they didn't express regrets about the things we're doing, and that's really what's important here. They recognized what's happening to our state because of the ravages of climate change, which now Los Angeles is experiencing, and I'm proud that we're sending help. I've been in communication with Gavin Newsom about that. But fundamentally, we have to attack climate change if we're going to stop these fires from destroying us. They understood the job creation potential of this, where we have so many jobs coming in with silicon anode battery companies in Moses Lake and sustainable fuels companies in Grant County and fusion companies that are leading the world in King County. And they understand the benefits that this act is bestowing on people with getting heat pumps and electric school buses and free bus rides for our kids. They understood these things. So I think that's the thing that's really important, what people felt about it. And I just can't tell you how gratified I am in that this resounding decision and vision statement by Washingtonians were given to us when they voted for these initiatives. On the use of the climate commitment dollars, I would suggest that when voters voted for that, they voted a strong expression that those benefits, those investments were very important to Washingtonians, And I don't think it would be a wise idea to turn around after a 62-38 defeat and turn around and give the enemies of climate change action, sort of hemorrhaging these investments. So I would certainly be wary of changing those investments. We're not out of the woods yet. And they continue just to bear fruit. Look, I'm still finding new jobs. I just signed this permit for the state's largest solar panel. It's like 300,000 homes. These are the kind of things that are happening daily or weekly. We don't want to slow down that progress. Now, I understand legislators are going to have tough challenges up here. So my thinking is I'm trying to share it with them, but they're going to have to make these decisions.
Thanks. Piggybacking on that in terms of the climate, your outgoing WSDOT secretary kind of raised the alarm around the lack of money going to maintenance and into highway expansion. In terms of the potential for a bridge on I-90 to become load restricted and really impact commerce, do you have any sort of thoughts over the 12 years of investments in the transportation system that have happened under your tenure around sort of whether we've made the right investments?
Well, I agree with Roger on this. In every transportation budget that I've proposed or discussions with the legislature, I have argued for a higher percentage of our investment to go to maintenance. I think his assessment is correct. Now, I love these legislators. The fact that they were able to get two of the largest transportation packages in our history was an accomplishment, including when the Republicans controlled the Senate. And I will remind people that the leader of the Republican Party said, we will never, never, never do a transportation package. And we did it. And that's because I persevered and others persevered. So during that time, I would like to have had a higher percentage go to maintenance, including in the second transportation budget. But I will just share one of our challenges in democracy. Legislators need to respond to their constituents. And constituents love to go to ribbon cuttings and see progress for something in their community. Fixing potholes and guardrails and checking the girders on a bridge is less romantic. It's less sexy. It's less exciting. And so there's a natural sort of inclination to go with new investments as opposed to keeping what you have. But I really do urge the legislators to increase our maintenance budget going forward. It's absolutely necessary. And I hope that they will do so.
Governor,
did you get the part how I love legislators? I want to make sure that they heard that.
Governor, you just mentioned the climate emergency in Southern California, and a lot of people in this state right now, today, are worried about their homes. Can you hear me, Governor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You just mentioned the climate emergency in Southern California. A lot of people, as they sit here today in your final days in office, are worried about the welfare of their homes, their family, their businesses, the insurance that they have. What kind of protections are in place right now for businesses and homeowners in the event, God forbid, an event in California happens here?
Well, the first thing they have is the nation's most robust, aggressive, and effective effort to stop the beast that is destroying our homes, and that's climate change. And I can tell you that I'm proud that, again, voters just said we want to protect this effort to defeat climate change. And in that bill, one of the most important things in the Climate Commitment Act is a $40 million program to help Washingtonians guard their homes in the Firewise program, to help them pay for the improvements to protect their homes from these ravaging fires. And I'm really glad that that fund was preserved. So there is a variety of things. And then there are a variety of things to help us deal with the problem of air pollution from forest fires burning. You know, our kids, one of the things that's motivated me, our kids couldn't go outside and play in the last 2 out of the last 5 years in August because of forest fire smoke. And it's hard to breathe and focus on math when you can't breathe. So in the Climate Commitment Act is dollars for air filtration systems and HVAC systems in our schools so people can breathe. So there's quite a number of measures that can help deal with this challenge, But I have to just kind of come back to a central tenet. Climate change is sort of, Joe Louis, remember the old boxer Joe Louis? He had a thing He'd say they can run, but they can't hide. He's talking about the prospective people he kept knocking out. They can run, but they can't hide. And we can run from climate change, but we can't hide. You run out of places to hide. We must confront it. We must defeat it. And I can tell you we're doing that with the Climate Commitment Act. And I wish the people well. You know, this is personal with all of us. All of us people have friends in Southern California. Trudy and I visited someone down there who's evacuated. They're safe, but they don't know whether they're home standing or not. And unfortunately, unless we act, that's going to become standard operating procedure. We're better than that.
One thing that I think is indisputable that's different from when you took office and now that you're leaving office is that America and the state has become far more divided. People have retreated into their partisan corners. What do you make of that? And are you concerned with how the state and the nation is headed and where they're headed as you leave office?
Yes, I am. And my first comments about the importance of a professional press is part of the solution, I think, to that problem. We have multiple challenges in democracy, but if I listed them, the number one is misinformation that people are receiving. In the current communication and media environment, basically people are receiving one source of information from a hose that the algorithms define. And the algorithms are looking for information that has one goal, and that's to make you angry and cynical and distrustful. And the more people they can make angry and distrustful, the more that algorithm will make money for the investors in those pipeline companies. This is a virus in democracy. And one of the reasons we're having such a polarization is because of that people are only being exposed to their own. They're not selecting their source of information. The algorithms are selecting their source of information, and that's driving polarization in our country. And it's very difficult for members in elected office to deal with that fundamental check. Now, again, a professional news source is the best antidote to that, and that's why I'm glad you're here, and I hope that your industry will grow. Second, we have another dynamic, and maybe this will sound wonky, but I think it's important. There's a dynamic going on in America that's really interesting, which is people are self-segregating by ideology. They're moving. People can now be more mobile, and they're moving to like-minded places. So there are half as many zip codes that are kind of purple in the United States than when I went in Congress in 1994. Half. There's half as many neighborhoods that have a mix of people ideologically. The reds are going in their conclave, and the blues are going in theirs. And that makes governing more difficult because to some degree, these legislators have to respond to the extremes. So that's a dynamic that is difficult. And obviously, the current occupant of the White House makes things more difficult in so many different ways. And I just hope, and I've committed myself to this, I'm never going to normalize that kind of behavior of that individual. I'm never going to do that. I don't think Washington State should ever take a knee to him. And I'm proud that we got some really strong advocates to do that. We beat him 95 times out of 97 times, I think, or something like this in court. And with Bob and Nick in charge, I'm confident our state will be well protected. Let's give everybody a second shot before I come back.
Okay.
Or a first shot. Anybody else? We're going to, yeah.
On the budget, Republicans continue to argue that the situation the state is in now is a result of, reckless spending decisions, and it was preventable in a lot of ways. I mean, do you flatly reject that argument, or do you second guess any of the spending that you signed off on over the years? Is there any acknowledgement on your part that it may have been too much, too fast?
No, I want to note that our budgets were balanced, and they continue balanced. And we're paying the rent. We're on the course. And when they say what a terrible state this is, sometimes I go a little worry of them trash talking the state of Washington. Look, we have been named the best place to do business, and the best place to be a working family, and the best place to have a bike in the United States. And one of the reasons of that, not the only reason, but one of the reasons for that is because we have done all of the policies we've had to make this a great place to live, which having the best financial aid package for kids, to have the best apprenticeship program, one of the best in the country, to have long-term care because your family can succeed, a somewhat more progressive tax structure. We've made investments in our people of medical care and increasing mental health. It's because these investments is one of the reasons we have been so successful as a state and why 1 million people have moved here while I've been governor of the state of Washington. So I do reject that assessment that this is a horrible state to live in. And when you get 1 million people living here, they don't share that view. Neither do, frankly, any of the people who've actually assessed the conditions of our state. Now, going forward, we've had an increase in caseloads, and this comes back to this issue of what we do in the future budget. The economy continues to generate unbelievable sources of wealth and increasing levels of poverty. And this is one of the great challenges of our time. I was listening to President Carter's service this morning and talking about his consistent theme was to try to reduce this outrageous inequity we have. And we have that in the state of Washington. We have had, at the time our economy is booming, employment up, unemployment extremely low, GDP up, even income levels up. We've had like a 20 or 30% increase of people going to our food banks like in the last 18 months. It is just an anomaly. And what are we going to do? Just tell those people, no, we're sorry you're hungry, but we like the Republicans better. Or we're going to kick your kid off of mental health because we don't have gumption enough to figure out a way to finance the mental health improvements that we still need. Or we're going to kick a single mother off of subsidized rent and throw her out on the street because we're unwilling to think about new sources of revenue. I don't think that's the direction our state should go. And importantly, I come back to this, the voters have spoken on this. I respect Republicans, I enjoy working with them, but the voters have spoken on this. They don't want to go backwards. They said so on long-term care, they said so on clean energy, and they said so on the capital gains. And I think we ought to honor the wishes of those Washingtonians. I've heard that. I've heard that one before.
Yeah, I know. You can judge this. The Elway poll said that if there had to be a tax on Washingtonians, 57% said they would like to tax wealthy individuals. And you talked about how the capital gains voters approved that in November. I'd like to ask, my softball question is, to you, Governor, how do you define wealthy? Is it assets, revenue? In your mind, what's a wealthy? Because critics say that wealthy label will start dropping down and more people will be taxed.
Well, how I define wealthy is if you're a person who has a great partner in life, 3 wonderful kids, 3 wonderful successful daughter-in-laws and 6 grandkids, and some modicum degree of health. I describe that as wealthy. So I feel very wealthy. But what voters might do, or excuse me, what legislators may do, look, they got some tough decisions. What I believe is that they're going to have to make some choices, whether we kick people out of housing, reduce the forward progress we're making in mental health, make sure we continue the long-term care bill, whether we in fact continue increasing, which I hope we can do, financial aid for special education students, or adopt some revenues. And then, if they reach that decision, I think it's likely they will, then you decide how do you distribute that burden. And to me, again, voters spoke on this, by the way, I think it was 64 to whatever, saying don't put it on working people. Ask some of the extremely wealthy people in our state to do something. And what that is a matter of great debate. I know that they're going to look at this wealth tax very carefully. If you do that, you have to be very sensitive to make sure you don't include assets that are impossible to value. You might want to just value stock, for instance. So that's a discussion they're going to have. And the proposal I've had is basically to say, let's not go backwards. Let's continue to have more progressive taxes. As Lori said, we've moved from 50 to 49th. That's not enormous progress. So I hope that they will consider something that will not end up with the state having more regressive tax structure, and also not decide that you're going to throw people out of the things that they need right now, that they continue to need, even though we have this tremendous economy that's being developed.
Okay. Thanks, Governor.
Before I go, I got one more ceremonial thing, if I can. As you know, as governor of the state of Washington, I am empowered to, if I meet someone that's really inspirational, that I feel is critical to the success of the state of Washington, and who has personally inspired me, I can name them Washingtonian of the Day. And when I do that, I take off the governor's pin and I pin it on him. And I only do this once a day, and I only do it once in a while when I'm really inspired. So I'm announcing today's Washingtonian of the Day is John Stang. John, could you please come up here and be honored? Please, would you please join me here? John has been a continual inspiration to me and my team. And basically, I want to say that when we've had tough decisions to make, like during COVID and everything, the last thing my team said, what would John Stang do? And that's how we did it. So an honor, John.
Yes.
That comes with a certificate.
Sit at home and watch Law and Order reruns.
Thank you all. Be well.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
All right, we've got a little changing of the guard here. Thank you, Governor-Elect Bob Ferguson, for joining us, and thank you, Governor Inslee, for speaking with us one last time. Our next speaker is a former University of Washington student body president, 3-term attorney general, and a pretty good fast pitch softball catcher for his daughter. He's also quite the Washington State history buff, and he'll make some history of his own when he's sworn in next Wednesday as our next governor. We appreciate you making time for us, and I think you do have some time for questions, and we'll let you go ahead and pick who you want to hear from. But thank you, sir.
Hey, thanks so much, everybody. And first, I think the governor's left the building, but you know, I've had a chance to work with the governor for 12 years, pretty closely, as you might imagine, and you know, I'll have a chance to talk more about him publicly later on, but just really appreciate him and Trudy, and they've been, you know, just so you know, super gracious with the transition. Rob McKenna was super gracious with the transition to me as Attorney General. That benefited me and my team tremendously, and that's something that Governor Inslee has provided to me and my team as well, and hopefully we're providing for Nick Brown. John Stang. Now I know what would John do is my first question, I guess, when grappling with policy issues, so looking forward to that and looking forward to your questions. I'll be super brief to get started. You know, today's actually the last day my transition team is meeting today. We'll be meeting over the Lieutenant Governor's office here and just right when I walk out of this conversation. So the team's been working really hard over the transition time, as you might imagine, making decisions on the agency, leadership, as you might imagine. But one thing we're announcing today that you'll be seeing probably shortly on your phone is announcing today some budget priorities for the state of Washington. So I'll be really clear. Obviously, I'm not proposing a budget, right? That's not something I'm doing. But we have put together a document that outlines, in some respects, some fairly detailed proposals on the budget saving side, but also what I think are good investments for us as a state. So you were obviously facing a very significant budget shortfall. And, you know, my approach is been very focused since getting elected on making sure that we are scrubbing our budget in detail to find efficiencies and savings that will help address that budget shortfall. So in the document that you're going to see here shortly, I'm proposing a 6% cut across state agencies. I want to be clear, some agencies will have to take more, some will take a little bit less, but basically the equivalent of 6% is what we're going to have. We exclude from that K through 12 education. We exclude from that public safety. But we're going to have those cuts across the board with those exceptions. I think people expect that, you know, when you're facing a budget shortfall. It's no different than a family budget. You've got to make your priorities. You've got to decide what's most important. You've got to cut things you can cut. And that's what we'll be doing as a state. A couple of the priorities that I have that I'll mention briefly before taking your questions. You'll see in there things you heard from me during the campaign. That won't be a shock. A big part of the campaign was investing $100 million into a grant program to hire more law enforcement officers. Washington State, as you probably heard me say many times, ranks last per capita number of law enforcement officers we have as a state. unacceptable. I'm pleased Senator Holy is going to be offering legislation, or maybe already has put together legislation. We've communicated about that. He's looking forward to working with me, and I'm looking forward to working with him on that legislation that's going to be bipartisan and trying to move that forward. So again, a key is showing we can make some savings. And by the way, this is just a first cut from my perspective. That's 6% across the board. You're going to save about $4 billion, okay? But that's a first step for me. But these investments are going to be important. Affordability is another key aspect. I'm looking forward to hearing from Lieutenant Governor Heck. He's been leading on the transition team, the committee on affordable housing. He has a very detailed report that I'm about to get that'll have a series of recommendations, so more to come on that. Another investment we're making is on childcare, a huge issue for people across the state. We're proposing $100 million that goes to increase investments, increasing eligibility for people who can access assistance with childcare. We propose that for folks who work in small businesses. So if you've got, for example, your family of 4, your income is about $100,000. We're increasing up to $100,000 of those who can access eligibility for childcare. I think currently it's around $79,000 or $80,000. There's a whole metric that's involved, but that's an investment as well. So from my perspective, coming as governor, investments in public safety, investments in affordability, those will be key. But look, I went through on the King County Council, smaller budget, but still not insignificant, a budget challenge. And we worked in a bipartisan way to go through that budget line by line and to find those savings and adopt a balanced budget that still serve the people. And some of those cuts will be difficult for sure, but I'm a believer that our government can be far more efficient and focused on the people, and that's going to be a key priority for me moving forward. All right, I'm going to stop there because I know we don't have a ton of time. I'm a lot of hands. I'm just going to start moving around. So let's go here, here, and there, just to start right here. Yeah.
Governor-Elect Ferguson, I was curious about your cabinet.
Yeah.
The legislature will, of course, make the final call here, but during the course of the campaign, there were suggestions about a housing secretary, or excuse me, just a member of some kind in your cabinet devoted to housing. A ferries chief, yes, perhaps pulled from Washington State Department of Transportation, as well as
mental health SAR maybe might have been the other.
Health SAR, and we haven't even, I think there, and OSPI potentially as well. Yeah. What are you in favor of in terms of in the overall cabinet level inflation, I suppose you could call it?
Well, I guess I don't consider inflation. What I consider is folks I'm hearing from directly on the most pressing issues facing the people of the state of Washington. So I'm hearing directly from them, and they're hearing directly from me. So yesterday, we had a day devoted to our ferry service as one example. I think you mentioned that, right? And one change to the cabinet is having the head of ferries be on the cabinet. We have a system in crisis, as you all know. But I'm a believer that I think what's worked well for me as Attorney General, let me put it this way, is I have a small group that meets me literally every single day. And I make sure that the most important cases we have or the most important policies we're engaged in, that's someone on that team is in charge, they're reporting directly to me on it. That keeps my priorities in line, and I'm getting feedback in real time about what's going on. So ferries is a good example of that, right? Housing is a good example of that. And mental health is a good example of that. I consider those amongst the core issues that we're facing. And so look, I just don't want to have the head of ferries. I don't want Steve down in some reporting to somebody who reports to somebody who reports to me. Forget it. You know what I mean? It's not the way I operate. If you got a crisis, act like you got a crisis, and it communicates to the people, right? When I was at this meeting yesterday with folks in the community, I think they appreciated hearing, hey, this person's going to be on my cabinet. You know, the concerns you're expressing, guess what? This individual will be reporting to me at cabinet meetings on a regular basis. And so for me, it's about accountability. And that's going to be important, and that's why we're doing it that way. So thanks.
The ferries chief being in your cabinet.
I have not changed my one thing I can assure you, if I said something during the campaign, I plan on delivering on it. That's just, so if that was a part of we were pretty detailed. We put on our website where we want to go, what we want to do. And so, yes, that is going to happen. I think we're hoping to have our first cabinet meeting on a week from today. I think we're trying to pull that off, and, head of ferries will be there. Yes. I should have started with the Washingtonian of the day, but yeah, go for it. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's forget Washingtonian of the day. I'm embarrassed. 2 questions. Yeah. One on your $100 million to hire more police officers. Are you, is that for a biennium, 1 year? Is that going to be a steady year by year by year thing? Essentially, I'm bringing up the questions that Tim Ornsby brought up about an hour ago.
Yes, those will all be, in fact, we're getting a report from the transition team, but my goal is $100 million over a biennium to invest in law enforcement. So that is our objective. That's what I talked about during the course of the campaign. I understand sometimes you see the budget documents, it's on a 4-year budget, you get the idea, but our investment that we're proposing is for the biennium.
Okay, and wanted to see if I heard you correctly, because it zipped by me and I don't know whether I heard it correctly or not. Have you identified $4 billion in cuts? What are they?
That's the across the board 6% agency cuts, right?
Yeah.
That generates tremendous savings if you do that. In addition, there's some specific items in there that you'll see that are much smaller, but as one example, one thing we'll be doing is looking at different agencies, right, and parts of state government to see if there are funds that can be swept, that can be better utilized for other purposes, right? So for example, I'm leading with my own office, the AG's office. I'm sweeping $35 million from a fund that I helped create that does our work on affirmative litigation. We're sweeping $35 million from that, putting into making these investments. The AG's office will be fine. I've talked to Nick Brown about it, right? They're going to be fine, right? Want to be clear. But hey, I'm sure Nick's not excited about it, but they can still function their core mission, right? They still have the resources to do that, but that'll be something we're looking at across agencies. That's an example in the document I put out today.
So this is just sort of everyone trims a little bit as opposed to we're going to get rid of that program or get rid of the Commerce Department or something. It's essentially everyone just trims a little bit here and there then?
So great question. So maybe I should elaborate a little bit. So what you'll see that's being announced now is I'm asking every state agency to propose their budget cuts. So there will be an equivalent of 6% across all state agencies. One agency might be 8%. One might be 4%, you get the idea, but it's going to be 6%. Because I understand, hey, some agencies might have a tougher time getting there, or I'm just not willing to make the cuts because of what that agency does, the service they provide to the people, right? Other agencies might have to take more. So that'll be a core part of it. Within that, of course, right, there will be decisions made that agencies are recommending and decisions I have to make about where those cuts are. Is it a program specifically, right? Is it something else? But as an example, there have been some recent new investments as a state. Those are important. Like I'm not minimizing how important they are, but if there's a service that the people haven't yet felt yet or is relatively new, maybe that's one that we need to look at. Can that be postponed, for example, until times are better economically, right? As opposed to one that, hey, folks have been depending on and has been proven to work effectively. So it's not, that's not going to be easy work, to your point. But from my standpoint, what I'm trying to communicate is there are no sacred cows. There's a reason why I picked the AG's office for a $35 million fund sweep. Okay. In addition, there's 6% cut. I want to communicate to all agencies, if I'm willing to do that to an agency I care a great deal about, okay, you too have to take part in this. So that's part of what we're communicating. Yep.
Does that include the CCA money? Does that include the CCA money, no sacred cows?
Well, CCA money is coming in, right? You see what I'm saying? That's money that we have that can be invested. There's not...
Or reallocating that money.
Oh, well, there'll be, look, and one conversation I'm having is with Climate Commitment Act funds is, hey, this is again, go back to conversation yesterday on ferry service. We need more boats in the water sooner, as an example, right? So I want to look at what we can do. I've asked budget staff to give me options of how we can do that, okay? Hey, one option is looking at Climate Commitment Act funds. Right? Can we use more of those funds to get more boats in the water sooner, as an example? So I think what you will see is anytime you're going through and, a challenge like this on the budget side, I'll just share my perspective. A, you've got to keep an open mind. There are no sacred cows around the budget, other than we've identified K through 12 education. We're not touching that. Public safety, right? So maybe that's not the right way to put it, but you see where I'm going. Outside of some core priorities, from my standpoint, one has to be open about it. And, on my days on the King County Council, I was the only Democrat that supported reducing the size of the King County Council from 13 county council members to 9, okay? Right? An idea that Tim Eyman supported. The reason we have 9 King County Council members today is because I was willing to take that vote, and the only Democrat to take that vote, to make that happen, to which I got a lot of criticism from people in my party, to put it very, very mildly. and it cost me my job on the King County Council. My 4-year term was shortened to 2 years because of that. My district was eliminated, and I had to run against another Democratic incumbent in her district, and my house is in the very corner where the new district was. If I'm willing to cut my own job, okay. If I'm willing to cut my agency that I love dearly, okay, with the fund sweep, I'm trying to communicate, okay, to the people of the state of Washington and to state agencies that this is how we need to operate when you're facing a $12, $14 billion shortfall. Yeah.
So I have a question, but first to clarify what you just announced,
Yep.
Is this an executive order and when does it go in place? When do these agencies have to identify the fund?
I don't know if have we set a deadline to it, Mike? Do you know if there's a deadline? It'll be soon. I don't know if there's a deadline in it or not, but it'll be, look, we'll be communicating very clearly that in order to make this work, right, the legislature needs to be, let me say it this way. For some of the cuts, it will require legislative action, for example, right? There are things in statute that will require a change in statute to effectuate it, as an example. So, yes, it'll be communicated very clearly. We need these proposals very soon, so we have time to go through them. My team needs to go through them, I need to go through them, and then make decisions about which ones we're moving forward on.
Okay, so my original question is we heard from the House Speaker and from Senator Peterson that they believe they need to raise taxes in order to fill this hole.
Yeah.
Do you believe that this budget shortfall, as it has been described, that it can be filled without raising taxes?
We're going to find out, right? So I start the job in a week, so I'm not there yet. Let's start with that. But again, trying to communicate before even taking the job how I'm going to try and tackle this challenge. And so the focus of the transition team, we've got 13 subcommittees. There's no subcommittee on revenue. That does not exist. My directions were very clear to that fantastic transition team. Don't look at it. It's not a conversation for me. What we are going to look at is how we can be more efficient, more lean, and decide what we want to prioritize for the investments we're going to make. So that's been my focus. That's been my sole focus. I had a long a meeting with the budget OFM folks just a couple nights ago. We're talking revenues, right? The whole conversation was, hey, how can we be leaner? How can we do this? What's the right % across the board for agencies? How can we maybe use CCA funds to get another ferry, right, in the water sooner? That's where my conversations are right now. That's my focus. Let's do it. I've got a lot of hands. I'll go as fast as I can. Go ahead.
You're our first new governor in more than a decade. I wanted to ask if you could describe a little bit about how you expect to work with the legislature and how that might differ from the way you saw the Inslee administration work with lawmakers. What sort of things are you thinking about strategy-wise or just communication-wise with the people who are going to have to sign off on the things you want?
Sure. I'll try and give a relatively short answer to an important question just in the interest of time. But, I think what I plan to do in terms of my relationship with the legislature is continue the way we've been doing as Attorney General. So, as you know, as Attorney General, I have a legislative agenda every year, right? We propose anywhere from 6 to a dozen bills, right, that we propose, agency request, work with the legislature on those. I'm proud that in my 12 years as Attorney General, we had, 50 bills that were signed into law, all but maybe 2 of them bipartisan, by the way. Many of those, the prime sponsor was a Republican. I found that on the issues that I was focused on with those policies, they tend not to be partisan issues, right? Changes to our gun laws, right, ban the self-assault weapons, those were one of the 2 votes that were partisan. But for the most part, we're able to work across the aisle with Republicans and Democrats on those proposals. So that's not going to change. The team that works with them is, Mike Webb, who's here, my current chief of staff, he's still going to be doing that operation, right? Joyce Bruce, my legislative affairs director currently, she's coming over doing that work as well. So they will have familiar faces that they've known for a long, long time. And I think what I would say is, beyond that is, the job is different to your point. So as AG, obviously I'm pretty focused on the legal side, but now my work as governor is even more directly involved with the legislature. So I think what they would see from me is someone I'm very interested in their work. I can get pretty interested in the details on things from time to time. And I hope to be an active presence around here and work with the legislature to try and solve problems and to work in a bipartisan fashion, where we can. And I look forward to that. Yes.
Part of your proposal that was just released today also includes a 3% cut to 4-year higher education institutions. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that, like how you came to those numbers and also what effect those cuts might have on those educational institutions?
Well, there's going to be a lot of conversations, right, with our higher ed colleagues going forward. I was mindful that, hey, how important I've heard from folks traveling around the state to our education system is. And so we're trying to choose numbers that we think are achievable and realistic. But obviously, right, we're at the front end of that conversation, right? There's going to be a lot of conversations and discussions about what that looks like, what those are, and but we felt that was a number that was doable and achievable. But obviously, this is something that is we're at the front end on. But at the end of the day, and I've already had a lot of conversations with folks who I respect and work with closely, who, just going to be honest, I'm not sure they fully appreciate the scope of the budget challenge we have. Just being honest with you, okay? And part of my job is communicating that very, very clearly, what we're facing. And we are not going to tax our way out of this thing. Not going to happen, right? The people expect us to get serious about that. And look, I know my agency, the AG's office, can take that 6% cut. It will not be easy, but we can do that in a way that still serves the people and serves our state clients. And other agencies can as well, and we just all have to lean into that. Thanks. I guess we got time for, someone's going to cut me off soon, but a couple more, yes.
Are there any tax proposals that you've ruled out? I'm sorry. Are there any tax proposals that you've ruled out? And could you support either the wealth tax or the jumpstart style tax?
Yes, I mean, again, I'm just not focused on that. I did place in the document that you're going to see here that's literally, I think, being released now, I do have a quote in there, right, a comment on the wealth tax. And the reason I put a comment on that is because it is obviously central to the proposed budget, right? So I just felt that was important to say something about that. And you'll have to find the exact words, but I think I express deep skepticism of the wealth tax. And so I'd refer you to that. But I haven't, beyond that, haven't been weighing in on any other revenue proposal. Look, in the past, as AG, it's not my job to weigh in on revenue proposals in the legislature, but, I did publicly support the capital gains tax, for example, right? That's not something I needed to do as Attorney General, but I felt that made sense to me, okay? That was a revenue proposal that made sense to me for a lot of reasons I won't bore you with now, and the people obviously agree with that. But moving forward, and where we are right now, I want to comment on the wealth tax because that is central to that budget, but I'm just not engaging in those conversations right now. I mean, we're just focused on a big part of the work that we have. And again, I'm just going to underscore this. It's no different than if you're a family and a breadwinner loses a job or gets a pay cut, and you've got to make choices with your budget. That's just the way real world works. That's the way the real world works. And I'm just really determined to make sure I'm articulating every opportunity with leaders, with legislators, with the public, how serious this shortfall is. And by the way, moving forward, I'll have more to say on this next week when I become governor, but, and maybe I'll conclude with this, I think I'm out of time, but I do want to at least mention this, is that we will need to understand how we got to this shortfall, okay? Right now my bandwidth is a little limited. We got a lot on my plate right now with the transition and leaving the AG's office and getting ready for taking office. There's a lot going on, but I intend to spend some time making sure I understand how we got to this level of a shortfall, and to make sure that I, as governor, do everything I can to ensure this doesn't happen again. Sometimes there's things that go on in the economy that are beyond your control, but I believe we need to take a hard look at how we got here. I think that includes taking a close look at what sort of growth projections we're relying on as we put a budget together. How realistic are those when that budget's being put together? Are we being realistic? And listening to experts on what they project for revenue growth as a state for the next 2 or 4 years. All those things are things that I'm paying a lot of attention to right now and giving a lot of thought to, and will no doubt have more to say next Wednesday at my State of the State. Hey, thanks so much, everybody. It's great to see you all. Hope you have a great day. Thanks. Hey, thanks, Roland. Appreciate it. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, I'm going to follow my team. Okay. Yep.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, you can stand up now. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next year, and we'll see you during the session.